Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Balconia Garden podcast. This is where we talk about all things container gardening, both indoor and outdoor, and you'll find tips and tricks for growing a flourishing container garden, regardless of its size, shape, or the space that you have. You can also find video tutorials on my YouTube channel. The channel's called Balconia Garden. You can listen to this podcast also on the YouTube channel, and you can listen to it on Spotify. Welcome to episode 3. In this episode, I'm going to share with you a step-by-step guide on how you can plan for the coming growing season. So it's January, it's like mid to late January now. It's cold outside. There ain't anything to it. January's not a month to be doing anything. But if you're like me, I've already mentioned this in a previous podcast, I get itchy to start gardening even when Mother Nature is asleep. She's like, no, not yet. So I need something to do. So basically, this is a really good time to start planning the coming season. So grab a cup of tea, get nice and cozy, sit down with a notepad and pen or a laptop, and let's start planning the year to come. So the first step is to do a review of the last season. Sometimes in life, to go forward, we have to go backwards. It's very dramatic, sorry, but I know it's actually true in this case. So I really recommend doing a review of what worked for you last season. So when we're reviewing our growing season, just have a think about what things worked, what didn't work, what plants grew really well there, how were the containers that you were growing in, were they positioned correctly, what can you improve on the coming year, would you like to extend your balcony garden or your container garden, things like this. So this is just going to start jogging your memory and start writing down little notes about, oh, I liked this, I really didn't like this. And this is going to start to inspire you into what you want to achieve this growing season. If the last growing season seems like a very long time ago, you can't remember much of what you did or the kind of details of it, take a look on your phone. If you're anything like me, you probably take 500 photos of any of the plants you're growing, videos too. So this will also help to jog your memory. This is just a little side note. In episode 1 of the Balconia Garden podcast, I talked about gardening resolutions you can do for 2025. And one of the resolutions was to keep a diary. I so recommend doing this. When you keep a diary throughout the season, you can just write down little notes, observations that you're having in the moment. That doesn't have to be beautiful, it doesn't have to be detailed, it can just be like, peas delicious, or carrots tiny, whatever it is. And when we're adding all these little bits of information, when it comes to reviewing this season that we're about to come into, when you're doing that next January, it's going to be so much easier. So yes, I would really recommend also keeping a diary. So we've completed step 1, we've done a review, we've taken a walk down memory lane, and we're knowing a little bit more about what we're wanting to achieve this season. Now it's time to write 2 lists. I love a list, keeps them in the straight and narrow. The first list is going to be all the plants that you would like to grow this year. And the second list is going to be about all the little jobs that need to get done. Projects, DIY things you need to buy, things you need to repair. Do I need to maybe get some new pots? If you'd like to add more decorative aspects to your container garden, do I want to paint it? Do I want to hang some new hanging baskets? Things like this. So the second list is more about structural or maybe DIY projects you'd like to do. So I'll add a little tip here for your first list, which is about the choosing the plants list. Make sure that the plants that you are writing down are really going to thrive in the climate that you're growing in and also in your specific container garden. So when you're choosing your plants, think of things like the aspect. So basically, what direction is my garden facing? This will determine how much sun you get, and this will also determine what plants will really grow well. You can also think of things like how much water do I get a year? How exposed is the garden? Is it protected from the elements? How much shade does the space receive a day? When you're armed with this knowledge, it's going to help you choose plants that are going to thrive. So yeah, that's just a little tip. Obviously, if it's your first time, if this is the year when you've been like, I'm growing a container garden this year, obviously you're not going to be probably aware of the container garden or the space where you're growing your pots. So you're not going to really know about how much sunlight it gets, water, all that things. But what you can do is get to know the climate. So just Google your climate and then maybe have this year as your experimental year. And if you're armed with your diary, you can write down all the things that work, all the things that don't. And again, this is going to help for the following season. But we're getting far too far ahead right now. So we've completed step 2. We've got our beautiful lists, our plant list and our to-do list. So we can put our to-do list to the side or if the weather's good enough, you can actually get cracking on those jobs. But for step 3, we're going to source our plants and our seeds. So once you've figured out what you want to grow, what plants are going to grow well there, it's time to start looking online. Where can I find these seeds? Or go to local garden centres, see what they have there. I would say I would do this earlier rather than later, because what can sometimes happen is if you've got a really popular cultivar of something like a tomato, they can sometimes sell out, especially seeds. So if you see online or even in your garden centre what you're looking for, I would actually just buy them now, even if you're not going to be sowing until March. As I said, go to your local garden centres. You'll be supporting local businesses, and you can also get to know the staff there, mine their information. Maybe you go to the garden centre and you're like, actually, all the plants on my list, I don't want to grow them now. I want to grow these and these and these and these. So this is the time for just being inspired, changing what you think you want, updating things. And when you find the seeds, especially because the plants are probably not even existing yet, I would buy them already. So we've completed step 3. We have sourced our seeds and our plants. The next step is to actually write a little sowing and planting schedule. This doesn't have to be complicated, but I tell you, it will bring order and method. We're not Poirot. It will just simplify what can sometimes be quite stressful if you're planting a lot of seeds. Just organising them, knowing when they need to plant them out, when they need to be harvested. So what I would do, so let's take peas for example. If I'm sowing my peas from seed, I would write the sowing date for them, so kind of maybe mid to late February, sorry. I would then write the date that they need to be pricked out by, so maybe in 2 weeks. And then I would write the date they need to be harvested, or the ideal harvesting date when the peas are going to be at their most fresh and delicious. So yeah, I would write those 3 dates: the sowing date, the date they need to be pricked out, and the date they need to be harvested. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, if you're sowing from seed, you normally have to plant them in around February to April. Of course, unless you want to plant vegetables, do an autumn or a fall planting. There are actually seeds that already need to be planted in January. There are some that have a longer life cycle, so we need to actually sow them already this month. So things like chilies or aubergines. So again, as ever, check on the seed packet or do a little bit of research online. It's going to keep you right. Like the diary, your planting schedule doesn't need to be anything fancy. You can just even write it in your personal diary. I like to do it on a separate piece of paper. And because with the balcony I had a limited amount of space, what I also would try and do was kind of stagger when I would sow seeds, when I would need to prick them out. It just helped with sort of space management for me. But you can decide whatever works for you best depending on your container garden and how much space and time you have. So we've now come to the 5th and final step in how to plan for the coming growing season. And this one is to actually calculate how many seeds and plants your garden can take. Now this sounds much scarier than it actually is, but it's actually a really useful thing to do. When we have container gardens, they're most likely limited in space, or we have a limited amount of pots. If you are new to gardening, or even if you're a seasoned gardener but you just adore plants, you love sowing, you love watching them grow, there is a tendency to either buy far too many plants or sow far too many seeds for the space that we have. I am guilty of that. Literally every year I did it, and I was like, no, don't do it this year. It would happen every time. And it's a shame, it's a waste, because, if we have to recycle plants, we can't always give them away. Sometimes your friends are like, I'm done. I have no space of my own. Stop pawning all your plants off on me. So when we calculate roughly how many plants will fit in our container garden, it just helps all round. We're actually saving money as well. And the way we do this is, so basically every plant has a maximum size that it will grow to. And if you're planting several plants in one pot, it's good to know this size, because obviously we want to leave enough space between each plant so it can grow to its maximum. So there's also less competition in the pot. This is going to just lead to happier and healthier plants. So for example, say I have a long planter and it's 60 centimeters long and maybe like 20 to 30 centimeters wide. And I want to plant lettuce in here. So say my lettuce is going to be, maximum size is going to reach about 20 centimetres in diameter. Into this 60 centimetre container, I would maybe plant 3 to 4 lettuce. So I would either sow that number or maybe just a bit extra to, take care if any seeds don't germinate, so I actually have enough plants. But I would sow maybe 5 to 6 seeds for this container. I do have to say my mission on the balcony was to maximise my growing space. So I did always actually pack in a little bit more in a pot than probably than the advice that I'm giving you right now. But when we're growing edible plants, we're also harvesting regularly, so you can get away with squeezing them in a bit more. But just make sure that they have enough light, make sure that there's enough space for the roots to be put down. And it might seem like a bit of a faff, but honestly, it actually simplifies, especially the sowing and planting out period. So that was my step-by-step guide on how to plan for the coming growing season. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you would like to support the channel or the podcast, subscribe. Are there any steps I missed out? Is there anything you do when you're planning your growing season? I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sending you all my good wishes. I hope you're staying nice and warm in January. I hope you're not doing too much because this is a month to not be doing anything. Lots of love, and I will connect with you in the next podcast. Goodbye.